According to Aristotle, the purpose of studying ethics is to actually become good. In his virtue theory, Aristotle describes for us how to go about accomplishing that task. The first thing we'll talk about in this short video is the kinds of virtue according to Aristotle. Then we'll look at virtue as a mean between an excess and a deficiency. And finally, we'll go through a number of examples of virtue. We finished the last video by pointing out that according to Aristotle, we have two projects. The first is to build a self, and the second is to build a community. And I mentioned at that time that building a self and building a community are interrelated activities. In this video, we focus on how one builds one's character. According to Aristotle, there are two main kinds of virtue: intellectual virtue, which is the excellence of our minds, and moral virtue, or ethike, which is the excellence of our emotions, our desires, and our choices. There are two kinds of intellectual virtue. The first is theoretical wisdom, or theoria. The second, practical wisdom, or phronesis. Theoretical wisdom is excellence in theoretical thinking. It's the kind of thinking that you're doing right now as you go through this video to understand Aristotle's thoughts on virtue. Theoretical wisdom comes about through reading and through teaching. Practical wisdom is a kind of wisdom that addresses everyday activity, knowing exactly how to act in every circumstance in life. This kind of wisdom is much more difficult to obtain than theoretical wisdom. It comes about through reflective life experience and mentoring. The only way to really achieve practical wisdom is to surround ourselves with people who have wisdom in the many different areas of human experience and are willing and able to share that information with us in real time. Now, moral virtue, which is the excellence of our emotions, desires, and choices, comes about through habituation. Aristotle says this: if you want to become courageous, do the courageous thing over and over again until it becomes second nature to you. If you're the kind of person who never shares any money with anyone else, you want to become generous, find out what the generous thing to do is through theoretical wisdom and practical wisdom, and then practice it. Do it over and over again until you come to love giving, desire giving, and you consistently choose to give in the right manner. Perhaps Aristotle's most famous teaching is the idea that virtue is a mean between an excess and a deficiency. According to this teaching, every virtue is the perfect amount of something. It might be the perfect amount and kind of a feeling, or it might be the perfect amount or kind of an action. The mean is not always directly in between the two extremes. According to Aristotle, the mean is that perfect place between excess and deficiency for promoting eudaimonia. So for instance, to be generous, I need to be able to give. But I have to give the right amount. It's not enough for me just to be a giver. I need to give the right amount. But I also have to give the right amount of the right stuff. I might see someone on the street who's asking for money, and I might think, oh, I should give this person money, thinking that I'm helping them to get off the streets. Money might be the wrong thing to give a particular person. Money might be something that is going to go towards alcohol or drug addiction. So for me to be generous, I have to be wise. I have to give the right amount of the right stuff to the right person. Each one of us has limited resources. So we need to find the person that we can help the most with our resources. I also need to choose the right time. It might be that I really could help my uncle with something, but now's not the right time. Now he's not able to receive my help or able to maximize the benefits of my help. So not only do I have to give the right amount of the right stuff to the right person at the right time, but I also need to feel the right kinds of feelings. I need to do it with the right motivation, not because I feel guilty or because I'm showing off, and I have to actually enjoy the action while I perform it. This is why Aristotle says it's so difficult to be good, that it's honorable, it's rare, it's laudable when we find someone who is truly good. This schema that we have here regarding generosity applies to all of the other virtues as well. If you think about anger, you need to have the right amount of the right kind of anger, and it needs to be directed at the right person, and it has to be done at the right time. And you have to actually have the right motivation and feeling while you're expressing that anger. And you need to have the right kind of enjoyment. You shouldn't, when you've gotten angry with someone, rejoice over the fact that you have power over them. Instead, the enjoyment you will have is that person really needed to hear it. There was an injustice being done. I've corrected the injustice. That feels good. So generosity, how being mild-mannered, how we deal with pleasure and pain, all of these things have to be done in exactly the right way according to Aristotle, and that really is his teaching of the mean. What I have here is a list of virtues and vices that I want to talk about briefly. As we know, the mean is always that perfect place between deficiency and excess. Let's take courage as an example. The person who is courageous is the person who deals well with fear and with danger. And there's two ways to go wrong with fear and danger. On the one hand, I can be a coward, somebody who's always overwhelmed with my fear, who will never face any danger, even when it's important to myself or to the community. On the other hand, you have the person who's rash. That's a person who doesn't feel any fear when perhaps she should, and rushes into a situation without a plan, without any real prospects of success, and without any wisdom. So courage is that perfect place between being cowardly and being rash. Generosity is the perfect place between being stingy and being prodigal. The person who is prodigal gives in excess, maybe gives too much money. Maybe a grandpa gives away all his money and he can't take care of himself. He doesn't have food to buy, or he doesn't have money to buy food or medicine. Stinginess is the vice that most of us deal with, and that is that we don't give enough, or we give we don't give off, or we don't give enough. And so generosity is perfection with regards to giving, and it avoids the excess of prodigality and the deficiency of stinginess. Temperance is how we deal with bodily desires like sex and food and drink and rest. The temperate person will be the person that enjoys those things in the perfect amount so as to promote flourishing for themselves and those around them. The profligate is a person who overindulges in these pleasures, and the insensible person is the person who doesn't enjoy them enough. Remember that virtues are always the action or the feeling that promotes flourishing. We're made to experience pleasure, and so someone who doesn't allow himself to experience any pleasure is going to have the vice of insensibility. What about our feelings towards ourselves? Self-respect is when I have an appropriate respect for myself. I see myself accurately. In the excess, I'm vain. I think of myself more highly than I ought. The deficiency is false humility. Someone might compliment me and I might say, oh, I wasn't that good, or oh, there are people who are better. That is really annoying. It's not good for me as a person, and it's not good for the community. So self-respect is having the right, accurate feeling about yourself. Optimism is a very important virtue. In order for us to accomplish any big projects in life, we have to have faith that our actions can lead to a successful conclusion. Of course, we can have an excess in this regard. We can be a Pollyanna, as they say, somebody who looks at the world through rose-colored glasses, who can't imagine that anything could possibly go wrong. That's unwise, and that will lead to disappointment and possibly destruction. The deficiency is pessimism, keeps us from accomplishing things that we could accomplish if we had a positive attitude. Here are some other virtues and their associated vices. Gentleness is how I deal with feelings of anger, and I've alluded to this already. Anger is a very important emotion for us as individuals and for our communities, because anger lets us know when something's not right. And expressing anger to someone who is being unjust or unfair is very important in helping them to grow in character and helping the community to function properly. So a person who never experiences anger is irascible, and that's a vice. The person who experiences too much anger or the wrong kind of anger, or it's geared towards the wrong people, that person is irascible, and gentleness is the virtue that we want to exhibit. The virtue of motivation is the virtue with how we pursue our goals in life. And we can think about this especially in terms of career goals. The motivated person will pursue her career goals with gusto, but will always keep in mind all of the other areas of her life that are important, such as family, neighbors, the community, her health, and her intellectual life, and so forth. The person who doesn't keep their goals in context is overly ambitious, and they're going to damage other parts of their lives. The unambitious person doesn't put in the work, doesn't have the discipline to accomplish any of the things that he could accomplish if he put his mind to it. Interestingly enough, Aristotle says that wittiness is a virtue, that wittiness actually adds to the enjoyment of life and to the flourishing of the community. The excess of wittiness is buffoonery. That's a person who tells too many jokes, or tells the wrong kind of jokes, or tells them at the wrong time. The boorish person doesn't have a sense of humor at all, brings everybody down, and cannot engage in this important part of human communal life, which is humor. Finally, we have friendliness. Friendliness is a very important virtue. It's important in the workplace, it's important in the family, it's important in the neighborhood. It has to do with just treating other people kindly and trying to make their day a little bit better. The obsequious person is being what we might call friendly, but they're going over the top, and usually with some sort of ulterior motive. The obsequious person wants to get a raise. The obsequious person really wants you to like them. And this over-the-top activity might come from some sort of failing or weakness or low self-esteem. The sulky person doesn't put in the effort at all to make the work environment or the home environment pleasant. And a perfect place between the deficiency and the excess for promoting flourishing for ourselves and for our community.